To open the application, we start by clicking the icon of the application. The application is called Matrix. So we double click on that, and then it takes us to this window and we see Matrix homepage 1. So we double click on that, and then it opens up the application. Now once we are here, this is the homepage. Matrix homepage, we can see up here as the title of this section here, and then we see this, the Matrix logo, Matrix Tech, business software, fast, easy and accurate. That's the tagline, and this is welcoming the users. Now it says please enable macros before you start. So before you start, you must enable the macros, because this application is a VBA application which runs with VBA codes, that is macros, and if the macros are not enabled, the application will not work properly. Now here on the left hand side here, we see by Sheikh Tijan Khan, scanfoundation72@gmail.com. Sheikh Tijan Khan, that's me. I am the developer of this application. Now when we look on the right part here, we see about this app. This app, the type is Excel VBA application. System requirements is Windows 7 and above, MS Office 2013 and above. And the purpose of this application is business record keeping for service enterprises. There are other apps that I have built also, which are for business record keeping but not for service enterprise. We have the merchandising enterprise and the others. And again, we see the developer, that's my name here, Sheikh Tijan Khan, and my email address scanfoundation72@gmail.com. Now that we said please enable macros before you start, let's go and enable the macros. To do that, we get to the tabs here and we look for the developers tab. The developers tab is here. We click on that and it takes us here, and the codes here we click on macro security, and then we see enable all macros. We click on that, and then our macros are enabled. We say okay to that. Now that we enable the macros, the next thing to do is to start. Now we click this button by starting, that's the start button, and it brings us to this place called the dashboard. When we are on the dashboard, if you want to go back to the home page, we simply can click on this button. It takes us back to the home page. And when we want to go to the dashboard again, we click the start button and it takes us to the dashboard. Now here we see this is a letterhead, that is a sample letterhead for the business that we build this app for, and it is called ZP Printing Services. Now here we see the that's the period of this record keeping, January to December 2022. Now anytime that you have this application, you can be changing, because this can be edited according to the period that you are keeping records for. Now the dashboard here, we have buttons like the sales button, the expenses button, the invoice button, and the summary button. Now we'll get into every one of these to see what is there. The sales button, when we click it, it takes us to a sales table where we can enter sales. So let's click that, sales, and then we are here on the sales table. Now on this sales table, we already have some sample data that is here, but we will try to enter some data to see how it works. Now again, we see the letterhead of the business that owns this application that we developed the application for. Now we see buttons like the insert date, clear, save, back to dashboard, and we see read selection. Now here we see the total sales, and then we see a figure here. We see currency again here. Now this is where we put the currency that we are dealing with, being it any currency, we put it here. Now once we have that, we come and insert the first transaction, that the sales transaction. So there we go. To do that, we start by clicking on the cell where we want to insert the date, and we use this date button. When we click on that, the date is inserted automatically. This date is the date of the computer system that you are using. And then if you want to type instead of clicking the insert button also, it's okay, it can still work. Now we can put a name here, that is the customer's name. We can put Peter, and once we have Peter there, we come to the items column, and then the items column, we take among the items that we have here. For example, we have an item called Jupiter, which is a book. Now Jupiter is there, and then when we come down here, the units, we see a drop down list. this drop down list. Here we can pick the unit that we want to insert in this columns unit. For example, Jupiter, since they are books, we click on books. Now this drop down list has a source. The source of the list is somewhere. This is the source of the list, so you can add or remove items from this list if you want to remove those items or add those items in this drop down list. Now from there we get to the quantity. The quantity, we can say we printed 10 books for Peter, and then the unit cost of every book, let's say, is 5,000. And once we have that unit cost, we simply click on enter, and then automatically it calculates the 5,000 multiplied by the quantity, which is 10, and then we have something like 50,000 here. Now this is done automatically. Now again, this column, this amount column, is totaled up, and then it takes us to this place here we call the total sales. Now read selection is a button that we can click on any part, that is anything we select. We can click on the read selection and it reads that for us. For example, we click on this cell here which says new customer encouragement. It's a comment, so when we simply click on that and click on the read selection,
new customer encouragement,
it reads that for us. Now the save button is when we are done making our entry and then we want to save it. We can simply save it by clicking this button. This button is simply the same as the apps save button here, Excel save button here, and they do the same thing. And here we have a clear button. This clear button can clear any data. For example, here we have typed Peter, and then we find that Peter, we needed to type it in capital letter, so we delete the Peter and then we retype it again. When we click on Peter and then we click the selection button, the clear button, it clears that, and then we can type in the correct word that we want to type. For example, Peter. All right, that's fine. Now this is how this sales table works, and once we are done with entering the data that we want to enter here, we simply click on save and it's saved. Click on OK and it's okay. Then we go back to the dashboard. Now we are on the dashboard here. We've seen the sales table through this sales button. Now we are going to see the expenses table through this expenses button. Now once we click again, we still find the sales table here, the expenses table here. As in the sales table, we can see that this is the expenses table, and then still we find the same buttons here, like the insert date, declare, the save, and back to dashboard. We find the total, we find a read selection, and then we find the currency that we are using here. Now this currency comes from the currency that was entered on the sales table. Once it is entered on the sales table, automatically it appears here, and we can edit it from here. When we want to edit it, we must go back to the sales table and edit it from there. Now there we go, we have our columns here again, and we can simply fill the columns again by clicking on the first column, which is the date column, and insert date button, it inserts the date. We type the supplier's name, the item, and then the units. Again, we have them in this drop down list. Anything we want to add or remove from this drop down list, we simply go to its source and do that there. We have the source here, and this is the units list. Now once we do that, we can come back here, and there we see we have the quantity which we can enter, the unit price, and then the amount calculates automatically. Now when the amount is calculated automatically, what we have is the total of all these amounts will be summed up here, and then we will have the total amount, that is the total expenses. Now the read selection button again reads for us anything that we select. For example, when we select 30,000, we click on it, it reads it for us. That's it. And then from there we can still go save first. Let's save, confirm that saving, and then we go back to the dashboard. We click there and we are back on the dashboard. Now the next button that we want to see is the invoice button. Now this takes us to an invoice that we can save on the desktop and print out. So we click on that, and then we are here. Now this invoice, let's delete that data. This invoice here is a sales invoice, the number and then the date. We can see the name, the address, and then we see this table here, the item number, the quantity, description, unit price, and the amount. Now we see some buttons here, which is going back to the dashboard, and we see insert date, and we see the next invoice. Now when we want to enter data, we first start by clicking the next invoice, because there is a 0 here, no invoice yet, so the next invoice is supposed to be 1. Once we click on the next invoice, 1 appears here, that's invoice number 1, and the next thing is to just click on insert date, and the date is inserted here. We click that, the date is inserted. Now we can type a name here, maybe a name called Mary, and then the address, we can see sample address, Now here we can fill in some quantity, for example 10, see purchase 10 boxes of an item that we will name there, and then here we have the unit cost, which is 2000, and once we click outside or we click enter, it calculates automatically and gives us this. Now let's the same Mary again, the same invoice, bought 5 items, and then 5 items pieces, 5 pieces of something, and then here we have let's say 4000 for the unit price, and then we hit enter and it gives us another calculation here. So we can see that the first entry gave us an amount of 20,000, the second entry gave us an amount again of 20,000, and both of them added together gives us 40,000 here. Automatically it is done, the total is 40,000. Now the balance to be paid here, we can see the balance is 40,000 because the customer, we haven't indicated paying anything yet. Now if she pays the full amount, it's simple, we just click on this button and then the full amount appears here, and then the difference between the total and the amount paid gives us a balance of 0. Now in case the customer paid a part payment, for example paid 30,000, that we can simply type 30,000, and then once we type 30,000, it again subtracts the 30,000 from the total, and then there is a balance of 10,000 to be paid by the customer. And there we have the currency box here, a drop down list again. When we click here, we can see our drop down list, and then we can select any currency that we are dealing with. Now the source of this drop down list is here, currency list. Anything we want to add in the list, we can simply add it here, or we want to remove something, we can remove it from here. Now here we have the total amount in words. We can type the total amount of the invoice, that's this total amount. We have it in words, and then from there we can print out the invoice. Now to print out the invoice, there are 2 things that a print button can do here. When we click on the print button, it saves the invoice as a PDF and puts it on the desktop, and it gives it a name, and then at the same time it prints out a copy of the invoice. Now let's press this button and see. We click on that, and then we can see the printer here is sent to the printer, and then when we also go, but the printer is not on, so it will not print right now, but that's just an example. Now when we go to the desktop, we can find the last printed invoice on the desktop here, which is automatically saved here. We double click to see what it looks like. We can see here our invoice 1, the date, and then it was Mary, and sample address, and all our entries are here. Now let's get back to the application itself here. Now when we are here, we can see that was the letterhead and then the sales invoice and all the details that are entered. Our invoice is now printed. When we are done with that, we can simply click the next invoice button, and when we click the next invoice button, what happens is all the data that is in here will be deleted, and then we will have number 2 here as the second invoice. So let me do that. Click that, and all the data is gone, and then no data is here anymore. We have the invoice number 2 and the same date. Now that's for the invoice, and then we get back to the dashboard through that dashboard button, and then we go to the summary. Now the summary here, we can see when we click on the summary button, it takes us to a place called the revenue and expenses summary. Here we have total sales revenue and total expenses revenue. There we have the total sales from the sales table, which automatically appeared here, and then the total expenses from the expenses table, which also automatically appeared here. There is no editing possible here. When we want to edit anything here, it sends us to the place where we are supposed to edit it. Let's try to edit this total sales revenue and see. It rejects that, and when we say OK, it sends us to the source, that is, you remember, the sales table, and then this is the total sales here. Now from there we can still go back to the dashboard and get to the summary to see what we were just explaining. Now there we go. The net income here is the total sales revenue minus the total expenses, which gives us this figure. And then the currency also is here. It comes automatically here from the sales table, and this is today's date, which is also not editable. Now once we have this, we can simply go back to the dashboard, and then we see this is where we are again, the dashboard. We get back to the home page, and that's the home page. And once we are done with the application, we want to close down the application. The easiest way here is to hold down your shift button on your keyboard, and then go to the close app here, and then that X, you close it, and then it gives you this dialog box, save all. You say here save all, and then you do some confirmations here, and you are out. This was the simple and quick explanation of the application that I call Metrics.